If God feels silent to you right now, this prayer is for you. Stay with me. I come before you, without defenses, without explanations, without trying to edit my heart. I come carrying thoughts I wish I never had, thoughts I replayed, thoughts I allowed to stay longer than they should have. You already know them, yet I choose to speak them, because truth spoken loosens their grip. There are thoughts in me that did not come from love, did not lead toward light, did not reflect who I want to become. I confess them now, slowly, honestly, without rushing past them. There were thoughts of judgment, quiet judgments, formed in seconds, about people I barely know, about people I claim to love. I measured, I labeled, one concluded, often without mercy. I confessed the ease with which my mind criticized, while my mouth stayed polite and my heart stayed distant. There were thoughts of impatience, when waiting felt unbearable, when timing felt unfair, when I believed I deserved faster answers, clearer signs, easier paths. I confess the resentment that formed during waiting, the irritation I hid, the frustration I justified. There were thoughts of comparison, when I looked sideways instead of upward, when I counted what others had and felt either superior or lacking. I confess how quickly comparison distorted gratitude, how subtly it stole joy. There were thoughts fueled by fear, imagined futures that never came, scenarios rehearsed endlessly, disasters created by my own mind. I confess how often I trusted fear more than you, how often I prepared for loss instead of resting in trust. There were thoughts that replayed old pain, conversations from years ago, words spoken once, but repeated endlessly in my mind. I confess how I kept wounds alive by revisiting them, how I let memory become a weapon against peace. There were thoughts of anger, not explosive, but simmering, quiet, controlled, yet poisonous. I confess how I fed anger, with silence, with imagination, with unspoken accusations. There were thoughts of pride, moments when I believed I knew better, was better, deserved more. I confess how pride disguised itself as confidence, as self-protection, as independence. There were thoughts of self-pity, when I focused on my burdens without seeing grace, when I counted my sacrifices and forgot your faithfulness. I confess the moments I felt unseen and assumed neglect, felt unheard and assumed indifference. There were thoughts that wandered where they should not have gone, curiosity without boundaries, imagination without restraint. I confess the times I did not guard my mind, the moments I allowed images, ideas, desires to settle in places they did not belong. There were thoughts that reduced people to functions, to appearances, to roles, instead of seeing souls. I confess how easily I forgot the sacredness of others, how quickly I consumed instead of honored. There were thoughts of escape, fantasies of avoiding responsibility, dreams of running from calling, temptations to choose comfort over growth. I confess the longing to numb discomfort instead of facing it, to distract myself instead of healing. There were thoughts of control, when I tried to manage outcomes, predict reactions, or manipulate situations to feel safe. I confess how control pretended to be wisdom, but was rooted in fear. There were thoughts of revenge, never acted upon yet rehearsed, imagined, justified internally. I confess how even imagined harm hardened my heart, how rehearsed justice poisoned compassion. There were thoughts I directed inward, harsh words, unrealistic expectations, judgments I would never speak aloud to another person. I confess the cruelty. I showed myself the pressure without grace, the standards without mercy. There were thoughts of doubt about myself, about others, about you. I confess the moments I questioned your presence, your care, your timing, because silence felt unbearable. There were thoughts of indifference, when I grew tired of feeling, tired of caring, tired of hoping. I confess how weariness made me withdraw emotionally, how exhaustion dulled love. I bring all of this to you, not because you demand it, but because I need release. I lay these thoughts before you, one by one, without minimizing them, without dramatizing them, without hiding behind excuses. Search my mind, not to condemn, but to heal. Reveal patterns I no longer notice, habits of thinking that shape my reactions, that quietly direct my life. I invite your light into places I avoided, corners I ignored, rooms I locked, because I feared what I would find. Cleanse my thoughts, not by erasing memory, but by redeeming meaning. Teach me discernment, to notice the first whisper, before it becomes a voice, before it becomes a belief, before it becomes identity. Teach me to pause, to breathe, to bring my thoughts to you, before they carry me away. Replace distortion with truth, noise with clarity, restlessness with peace. Where my thoughts were anxious, plant trust. Where my thoughts were bitter, plant mercy. Where my thoughts were impure, restore wholeness. Where my thoughts were proud, teach humility. Without shame, I do not ask for perfection. I ask for alignment. I ask for a renewed mind, not instantly, but faithfully, through daily surrender. When old thoughts return, remind me they are visitors, not rulers, not definitions, not destiny. When I stumble again, meet me with patience, not distance, not disappointment, but guidance. Help me develop inner honesty, where confession becomes natural, where hiding feels unnecessary, where truth feels safe. Let my inner life slow down enough to recognize your presence again. Heal the roots beneath these thoughts, the unspoken grief, the unmet needs, the fear of rejection, the memory of loss. Touch what I buried, what I named weakness, what I avoided out of survival. I trust you with my mind, even when it feels fragile, even when it feels crowded, even when it feels unclear. Thank you for listening, without interrupting, without correcting harshly, without withdrawing. Thank you for mercy that reaches even my thoughts, not only my actions. I receive forgiveness, not as a theory, but as cleansing, as lightness, as release. Teach me to think in rhythm with you, to let truth shape reaction, to let love guide imagination. As this prayer continues, stay with me, because there is still more to lay before you, more honesty waiting, more healing unfolding. I remain here with you, because the first layer was not the deepest, and my heart knows there is still more to confess. I do not rush this moment. I do not shorten the truth. I allow what has been hidden to surface gently. There are thoughts I carried that shaped how I see myself. Quiet beliefs formed over time, not from truth, but from repetition. I confess the thoughts that told me I am only valuable when I am useful, only worthy when I perform well, only accepted when I do not need much. Those thoughts trained me to hide weakness, to mask exhaustion, to keep asking, how am I doing? Instead of, how am I being? I confess how easily I confused productivity with worth, busyness with purpose, movement with obedience. There were thoughts that made rest feel like failure, stillness feel unsafe, silence feel empty. I confess how I resisted rest, even when my body asked for it, even when my soul needed it, because stopping meant listening. There were thoughts of self-reliance, a belief that I must hold everything together, that asking for help was weakness, that leaning meant falling. I confess the pride hidden inside independence, the fear hidden inside strength. There were thoughts that made me suspicious of closeness, that told me connection is risky, that vulnerability invites pain, that distance is safer than intimacy. I confess how I built walls and called them wisdom, how I avoided depth and called it peace. There were thoughts that replayed shame, moments I wish I could erase, choices I would undo if time allowed it. I confess how shame became a background noise, soft but constant, shaping how I speak to myself, shaping what I believe I deserve. There were thoughts that assumed rejection before it happened, abandonment before it arrived, loss before it came near. I confess how anticipation of pain stole joy in advance, how fear rehearsed grief that never became real. There were thoughts of resentment, not loud, not dramatic, but heavy, stored quietly in my chest. I confess how I remembered who disappointed me, who failed me, who did not show up longer than I remembered, who stayed. There were thoughts that kept score, that tracked fairness, that counted who owed whom, even when love was asked to forgive. I confess how I struggled to release what felt unjust, how I confused forgiveness with denial and chose neither fully. There were thoughts that questioned my own calling, my place, my direction, my worth in the story you are writing. I confess the moments I looked at my life and asked quietly, is this all? Not out of curiosity, but out of discouragement. There were thoughts that told me I am behind, late, missing something essential. Everyone else seems to have. Confess how comparison did not always look like envy. Sometimes it looked like despair, sometimes like self-doubt, sometimes like quiet resignation. There were thoughts that made me impatient with growth, angry at process, resentful of slow transformation. I confess how often I wanted healing without time, clarity without waiting, change without discomfort. There were thoughts that blurred truth, that bent reality to fit emotion, that made feelings feel like facts. I confess how easily emotion took the wheel and wisdom sat quietly in the back, ignored. There were thoughts that numbed me, not dramatic sins, but small escapes, endless distractions, quiet avoidance. I confess how I reached for anything that softened discomfort instead of sitting with it. There were thoughts that dulled gratitude, that made ordinary grace invisible, that focused on what was missing instead of what was present. I confess how familiarity made miracles feel normal and provision feel expected. There were thoughts that treated you like a solution instead of a presence, a fixer instead of a companion. I confess how I prayed for outcomes more than relationship, for answers more than intimacy. There were thoughts that doubted my prayers mattered, that silence meant absence, that delay meant denial. I confess how quickly I interpreted silence as distance instead of invitation. I confess the times I stopped listening because I feared what you might reveal, the changes you might ask for, the surrender you might require. I bring all of this to you now, without filtering, without cleaning it up, without turning it into theology. This is simply my heart, as it is, tired, complex, honest. Meet me here, not with pressure, not with disappointment, but with presence. Untangle the knots I can no longer see clearly, the beliefs I adopted unconsciously, the lies that feel familiar because they stayed so long. Teach me to recognize the difference between conviction and condemnation, between guidance and shame, between your voice and my fear. Renew my mind where it learned survival instead of trust, control instead of surrender, distance instead of love, where I learned to brace myself. Teach me to rest where I learned to hide. Teach me to be seen where I learned to numb. Teach me to feel safely again. I give you permission to rewrite my inner language, the way I speak to myself, the assumptions I make about you, the expectations I carry about life. Let truth become louder than old scripts, grace stronger than habit, love deeper than fear. I stay here with you because confession is not one moment. It is a doorway, and I am still walking through it. Remain with me as more honesty rises, as deeper layers open, as healing continues to unfold. I am not finished yet, and I trust that you are not finished with me. stay before you, because even now, there are deeper layers, slowly surfacing, not forced, not rushed, but ready to be seen. There are patterns in me that I did not choose consciously, yet I lived inside them, learned them, repeated them, until they felt normal. I confess the ways I learned to protect myself. Instead of trusting you, the habits formed when safety felt uncertain, when love felt conditional. There were thoughts that taught me to stay alert, to read the room constantly, to anticipate moods, to adjust myself so others would stay pleased. I confess how vigilance became second nature, how peace felt unfamiliar, how calm felt temporary, as if something bad must follow. There were thoughts that trained me to overthink, to replay conversations, to analyze tone, to search for hidden meaning, even where none existed. I confess how mental noise replaced simplicity, how clarity became crowded, how rest felt earned instead of given. There were thoughts that taught me to expect disappointment, to lower hope before it could rise too high, to protect my heart by never fully opening it. I confess how guardedness felt like wisdom, how restraint felt like maturity, even when it slowly starved my soul. There were thoughts that distorted love, that equated love with effort, sacrifice without limit, giving without receiving, staying silent to keep peace. I confess how easily I confused endurance with love, tolerance with grace, self-erasure with humility. There were thoughts that made me feel responsible for the emotions of others, as if harmony depended entirely on my restraint, my silence, my compliance. I confess the weight of responsibility I carried. That was never given to me, never asked of me, never meant for me. There were thoughts that made boundaries feel cruel, saying no feel selfish, distance feel like failure, even when wisdom required it. I confess how I ignored inner warnings, subtle discomfort, quiet resistance, because I feared disapproval more than imbalance. There were thoughts that kept me loyal to situations that drained me, patterns that diminished me, relationships that required constant shrinking. I confess how long I stayed where growth stalled, where joy faded, where love became obligation. There were thoughts that whispered, "You are difficult, you are too much, you ask for too much," until I learned to ask for less, until I learned to expect less. I confess how those thoughts reshaped my expectations, lowered my standards, quieted my needs, and convinced me this was maturity. There were thoughts that feared conflict so deeply that truth became optional, honesty became dangerous, and silence became habit. I confess how often I chose peacekeeping over peacemaking, quiet over clarity, avoidance over courage. There were thoughts that feared abandonment, so I learned to detach first, to leave emotionally before anyone else could, to soften loss by expecting it early. I confess how protection sometimes looked like indifference, how fear disguised itself as independence. There were thoughts that told me I must earn love, prove worth, justify space, deserve rest. I confess how deeply that belief settled, how it shaped my prayers, how it shaped my striving, how it shaped my exhaustion. There were thoughts that made me uncomfortable with receiving, with help, with generosity, with kindness offered freely. Confess how grace felt suspicious, how gifts felt undeserved, how abundance felt temporary. There were thoughts that confused faith with certainty, trust with control, obedience with perfection. I confess how afraid I was to admit confusion, how hard it felt to sit with unanswered questions, how quickly I searched for conclusions. There were thoughts that wanted clarity more than closeness, answers more than presence, resolution more than relationship. I confess how impatience masked itself as zeal, how urgency crowded out listening. There were thoughts that resisted transformation, not openly, but quietly, clinging to what was familiar, because change felt like loss. I confess how comfort sometimes mattered more than truth, how familiarity felt safer than freedom. There were thoughts that misinterpreted pain, that told me suffering meant failure, that struggle meant I was off course. I confess how quickly I questioned myself. Instead of trusting the process you were guiding me through, I bring these patterns to you now, not with shame, but with willingness, not to condemn my past, but to free my future. Gently separate what protected me once from what imprisons me now. Honor what helped me survive, but heal what no longer serves life. Teach me a new way of thinking, slowly, patiently, without violence to my soul. Where my mind learned fear, teach trust. Where my mind learned shrinking, teach wholeness. Where my mind learned silence, teach truthful voice. Where my mind learned control, teach surrender. That feels safe. I offer you not just my thoughts, but the systems beneath them, the beliefs under the beliefs, the roots beneath the habits. I allow you to sit with me in what feels unfinished, unresolved, uncertain. I trust you enough to stay open, even when clarity delays, even when answers wait, even when growth is slow. I am still here, still confessing, still listening, still becoming. Remain with me as deeper healing continues, as old structures loosen, as new life begins to form quietly within. I do not rush this work because it is sacred, and I am learning that wholeness is built gently, layer by layer. I remain open before you because there are places I have not yet named, places shaped by time, by silence, by experiences that taught me how to endure, but not how to rest. There were seasons when I learned to survive by becoming small, by lowering my voice, by minimizing my needs, so the world around me would not feel threatened. I confess how survival became identity, how adaptation became habit, how endurance became proof of worth. There were thoughts that taught me to read danger in uncertainty, to sense loss before it arrived, to prepare for pain, as if preparation could soften impact. I confess how hyper-awareness replaced peace, how constant readiness crowded out trust, how vigilance became exhausting. There were thoughts that made me suspicious of joy, as if happiness were temporary, as if laughter invited disappointment, as if peace needed to be guarded constantly. I confess how often I held joy cautiously, never fully embracing it, never fully resting in it, because part of me waited for it to end. There were thoughts that told me hope is dangerous, expectation leads to pain, and detachment is safer than belief. I confess how fear sometimes disguised itself as realism, how pessimism pretended to be wisdom, how caution crowded out faith. There were thoughts that judged my own emotions, labeling them too much, too sensitive, too inconvenient. Instead of listening to them with compassion, I confess how I learned to mistrust my feelings, to override intuition, to silence inner signals that were meant to guide me. There were thoughts that treated emotions as problems to fix, instead of messages to hear, instead of invitations to understand. I confess how quickly I dismissed what I felt, especially when it felt messy, uncomfortable, or inconvenient. There were thoughts that associated love with effort and pain, with sacrifice without rest, with giving until empty, with staying even when harmed. I confess how distorted love became in my mind, how loyalty overshadowed wisdom, how endurance replaced discernment. There were thoughts that made me stay silent when truth needed voice. That convinced me. Speaking up would break everything, while silence slowly broke me. I confess the fear of being misunderstood, the fear of conflict, the fear of being seen as difficult, as demanding, as inconvenient. There were thoughts that trained me to anticipate disappointment from authority, from leadership, from systems meant to protect. So trust felt fragile. I confess how past experiences colored present expectations, how history whispered into current decisions, often without my awareness. There were thoughts that told me I must handle everything alone, that support is unreliable, that dependence leads to loss. I confess how loneliness sometimes felt safer than disappointment, how isolation felt easier than hope. There were thoughts that numbed grief, postponed mourning, delayed healing, because stopping to feel felt overwhelming. I confess how I stored pain instead of processing it, how I carried loss instead of releasing it, how unresolved grief quietly shaped my reactions. There were thoughts that made me impatient with my own healing, frustrated by setbacks, critical of slow progress, as if transformation were a task to complete rather than a journey to walk. I confess how easily I compared my healing to others' timelines, measured my progress against visible outcomes, and judged myself harshly for being unfinished. There were thoughts that made me ashamed of still needing help, still asking questions, still learning lessons I thought I should have mastered. I confessed the pressure to appear strong, to look healed, to perform wholeness before it fully formed within me. There were thoughts that resisted surrender, not because I lacked faith, but because letting go felt like losing control over my own safety. I confess how surrender felt threatening, how trust felt risky, how release felt like exposure. There were thoughts that kept me in cycles, repeating patterns, even when they hurt, because familiarity felt safer than the unknown. I confess how often I chose known pain over unknown healing, predictable discomfort over unfamiliar freedom. There were thoughts that mistook endurance for calling, suffering for obedience, and struggle for destiny. I confess how difficult it was to believe that ease could coexist with faith, that peace could be part of obedience, that rest could be holy. I bring these confessions to you, not as accusations against myself, but as truth uncovered, as light invited, as healing begun. It with me, in the places where I am tired, where I am confused, where I am still learning how to trust safely. Teach me to recognize when endurance becomes harm, when loyalty becomes self-erasure, when sacrifice loses love and becomes fear. Teach me discernment that is gentle, wisdom that is kind, strength that does not require hardness, where my mind learned suspicion. Teach openness without naivety, where my heart learned fear. Teach courage without force, where my soul learned exhaustion. Teach rest without guilt. I allow you to redefine love for me, not as pain tolerated, but as life exchanged, not as silence endured, but as truth spoken gently. I allow you to redefine strength, not as carrying everything alone, but as knowing when to lean, when to ask, when to receive. I allow you to redefine faith, not as certainty without doubt, but as trust that stays present. Even when answers wait, I stay here, still confessing, still unlearning, still allowing truth to rearrange what once kept me alive, but now keeps me small. Remain with me as this work deepens, as false definitions loosen, as new understanding grows, quietly, patiently. Within, I trust that what you are forming will be gentler than what I survived, truer than what I learned, and more whole than anything I could create alone. I rest here now, not because everything is resolved, but because everything has been spoken. I do not leave lighter, because I am finished, but because I am held. What I confessed is no longer hidden. What was heavy is no longer carried alone. I trust that you gather every honest word, every quiet tear, every unfinished thought, and turn them gently toward healing. I release this moment to you, the work you have begun, the truth you have uncovered, the peace that is still growing. As I go, stay with me, shape my thoughts, steady my heart, and remind me that confession was not weakness, but the beginning of rest. I place myself in your care, not perfected, but willing, not complete, but loved. Amen.